Hello and welcome. In this video, I wanted to take a look at an Adeptus Mechanicus list that has done rather well within the new chapter approved Nephilim edition. This list came in 4th out of 38 players, and it was played by Rikard Nilsson. This list was played in the tournament known as Viking Games Warhammer 40k Summer Grand Tournament, which was held in Sweden on July 9th through 10th. So this is a very recent list, and this tournament was utilizing Nephilim rules. So let's take a look at what this list includes. I can tell you already, there's not going to be a ton of surprises from what we expected the Admech to look like, but there are a few interesting things to look at and a few interesting things to consider based on how this list was composed. To begin with, this is an Army of Renown, Veteran Cohort, Lucius Battalion Detachment, and if you're interested in learning more about the Veteran Cohort, please check out my video I did on a Ryza list not too long ago. I'll leave a link down in the description for you to follow if you're interested. That being said, we won't dwell too long on that, and rather let's go right into the list. This list begins with HQ choices like all battalion detachments do, and the first HQ choice within this battalion detachment is a Skitarii Marshal. This Skitarii Marshal is the warlord of this list, as he must be because of it being a veteran cohort. This Skitarii Marshal has been given both a trait and a relic for his warlord status. The trait that he has been given is Calculate Without Diversion, which is a great way to reduce command point costs for different stratagems within the Veteran Cohort supplement. This is definitely a very beneficial warlord trait, especially now with how tight command points have become. So this one really does help you mitigate some of those command point spends that you'll be making throughout the different turns, especially with the pre-game spending and how little command points you start out with to begin with. Following that, the relic that the Skitarii Marshal has been given is the Cantic Thrallnet. This relic is a rather good one and seems to have been edging out Exemplar's Eternity within Skitarii lists. While Exemplar's Eternity is definitely a very nice ability to have, as it allows you to make more rerolls, the Cantic Thrallnet does give you something very unique, which allows you to manipulate your Doctrinas a lot more successfully, and to keep certain Doctrinas up and running on certain units indefinitely. This definitely makes it a good choice, and something that I would love to see baseline within future Adeptus Mechanicus armies, as it's something very fun to play with, and I definitely think it's something that's going to be very powerful going into the future of the 9th edition play, and that's just something about how fun and good of a relic that is. Now moving on to the second HQ choice, we come to a Tech Priest Dominus. This Tech Priest Dominus is armed with a Macro Stubber and a Volkite Blaster. In addition to that, he has been given a relic and a Holy Order. For the relic, he has been given a Solar Flare, meaning that whatever he's accompanying is going to be going across the map incredibly quickly. And as for the Holy Order, he is within the Artisan's Holy Order. The Artisan's is an interesting Holy Order that might not be the best one out there, as it's rather expensive for what it does. However, it does have a few interesting capabilities, such as allowing a core unit to fall back and shoot within the same turn, as well as being able to increase the strength of ranged weapons when taken to its secondary mode. However, the most important thing about this Holy Order is the command point reduction that it offers on wargear stratagems. This is especially important because, as you'll soon see, this list pretty much starts out with 0 command points, meaning that if it goes first, it really wants a way to find a way to utilize things like Galvanic Volley on the first turn, especially when combined with that Solar Flare relic. As such, Artisans is a very important part of this list, and I definitely think it's one that shouldn't be overlooked, simply because it wasn't very popular in the past. However, now it's not only a decent and solid ability, it's also incredibly powerful due to that command point reduction. So do keep in mind, the power of the Holy Orders has significantly increased due to the fact that they offer those command point reductions. The third and final HQ choice for this battalion detachment is a Tech Priest Manipulus. A Manipulus is very common within veteran cohorts, as he has the ability to buff the shooting of different Skitarii units that can be very beneficial to their stat profile. This Tech Priest Manipulus is armed with a Magna Rail Lance for his optional weapons, and has been given both a trait and a relic. For his trait, he has been given the Luminescent Blessings, which is one of the strongest traits within the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex, and one of the parts that really makes you want to play the Lucius Forge World. As for the relic, he has been given a Raiment of the Technomartyr, which is an incredibly powerful relic that not only increases his durability, but allows a friendly core unit to ignore hit and ballistic modifiers when shooting at an enemy unit. This can drastically increase the accuracy of any unit buffed by this ability, as it can really mitigate some incredible modifiers that your opponent might have. And as such, this is an incredibly popular relic that you'll see in most Adeptus Mechanicus lists. And on top of that, the Manipulus has been given a Holy Order, which is the Holy Order of the Logai. The Logai is an incredibly powerful durability buff that is going to be seeing play in most Adeptus Mechanicus lists, especially when combined with something like the Luminescent Blessing and the Dogma benefits of the Lucius Forge World. As such, we can already see that this list is rather heavy on different abilities that are very common within Adeptus Mechanicus lists, such as the different relics and traits that we see, and has made very strong use of the different benefits that the Lucius Forge World offers. I definitely think this is very indicative of what lists are going to look like within the future, though there might be some differences within some of the relics and warlord traits that you would see on different HQ choices. Now, one other thing this list includes is because it has taken up all of its HQ slots, it cannot bring another HQ slot normally, though it utilizes the Brotherhood of the Cog ability to take a non-force organization unit as an additional HQ choice. In this case, this list has taken a Techno-Archaeologist as its Brotherhood of the Cog unit. This is a rather cheap HQ choice and a way to bring an additional Tech Priest so that you can bring some additional buffs on that unit. In this situation, the Techno-Archaeologist has been given the Order of the Magi Holy Order. This Holy Order is one that's rather common that gives you some additional mobility benefits early in the game due to its advanced benefits, and then later can be switched over to generate additional hits. Do notice that this list is taking 3 of the 4 Holy Orders, and in large part that's probably because of the command point reductions that they offer, in addition to them having rather good abilities. And as such, I would say the Holy Orders have seen a major buff in this edition as they were already rather strong abilities, and now having the additional benefit of reducing command points when you're rather starved for those command points is a rather big deal. I would also like to point out that the reason that the Dominus is used in this situation is because he plays a very similar role to the Skitarii Marshal. However, he is more expensive within points, and he is a little bit tougher, though generally if you don't need additional Tech Priests within your list, I would definitely say the Skitarii Marshal is a better choice within a veteran cohort detachment. However, as you can see, because of the Tech Priest requirements in this list to bring those different Holy Orders and all of the different relics and traits that the list desires, it definitely requires you to make some concessions such as taking a Dominus over a Skitarii Marshal, as they can fill similar roles, although they are not necessarily analogous to one another. Definitely, if you're going to be cutting down to 2 Holy Orders, I'd probably cut out the Tech Priest Dominus and simply include another Marshal. Though that is definitely hard to do, especially now with all of the different constrictions you have within list building. That's not to say this is the perfect and right way to build a list, just that it's very important to consider what the Dominus can do in place of the Skitarii Marshal. I will say that is something that the new command point changes have introduced as variety, because now you have to be a little more creative to fit in certain units within a list without necessarily compromising what those units are supposed to do within a list. That being said, I'd rather have more freedom overall than feeling like I'm forced to take a Dominus in a situation where I'd rather have a Skitarii Marshal, simply because I feel like I need that additional Holy Order to make those command points viable within the list. Anyway, with that being said, that covers pretty much all the HQ and HQ similar-like choices. So moving on, we come to the troop choice of this battalion detachment. Being a battalion detachment, it's going to include a healthy amount of troops. In this situation, the first troop choice is a unit of 20 Skitarii Rangers, being upgraded only with an Omnispecs, and being given an additional trait, which is the Firepoint Telemetry Cache. This trait is a little bit confusing because, as you know, the veteran cohort already gives Rangers the benefit of light cover if they do not move or fall back within that turn, but the Firepoint Telemetry Cache gives them the benefits of light cover in addition to giving them an additional point of armor save when they're entirely within a terrain feature. Granted, there is a benefit of them gaining the light cover benefits even in a turn where they have to move, and gaining additional armor save benefits when they are within terrain. In addition to that, they can also pass on the benefits to other units with data tethers that can benefit from this ability. So there's definitely going to be situations where you're going to give other units this benefit and not just your Rangers. So there's definitely a lot of utility to be had with this ability, and it can have a lot of interesting applications, so it's not necessarily as odd as it may look at first glance. Now moving on to the second troop choice. The second troop choice consists of another unit of 20 Rangers, in this case being armed with an Omnispecs, an enhanced data tether, and a power sword. The power sword in this case, as we'll see, is probably just some point filler. Unfortunately, the Adeptus Mechanicus have very few options for spending 5 points here or there, so most likely this was just the last 5 points left over that the list had to spend somewhere, and as such, they basically were pretty much forced into taking some kind of melee upgrades for their Skitarii Rangers. That's not the end of the world, but it's definitely not something that you're incredibly happy to be forced into. Definitely it would have been a lot funner to have an option to take some kind of special weapon for 5 points, but unfortunately none of the special range weapons are that cheap, and on top of that, even if you could take one, there is something to be said about how it interacts with Galvanic Volley which does make it a little less likely that you're going to be taking special weapons within some of these squads. Now that being said, if we look at these two different squads, it's important to note that one of them has a data tether and the other does not, and simply has an omnispecs and a warlord trait. This most likely means that one of these units, the one with the power sword and the data tether, is most likely being accompanied by the tech priest Dominus, who teleports them into position to utilize Galvanic Volley in the first turn, thanks to the command point reduction that the Artisan's Holy Order offers him. Now on top of that, they can even benefit from the Firepoint telemetry cache as needed thanks to their data tether. Either that, or they can be benefited by the Guitar Marshal at a given range in order to increase their ability to output fire. The other unit is most likely being accompanied by some of those other HQ choices, so that they can have their range and durability extended even if they're out in the open in order to fire their weapons. This gives you a lot of ability to kind of position those two different units in different ways within different games. And the power sword is best on a unit that is going to be teleported within a closer range of your opponent's enemy units. And as such, it's good to consider even small decisions like that, because you could have put the power sword on any unit. However, by considering which unit you're probably going to be teleporting in most situations, you do have a better allocation of those 5 points. Sure, it might not matter in the majority of the games, but in the situations where it does matter, it's definitely a good little perk to have, and it's definitely something that's always good to consider how everything's going to play out. Not only that, but the Artisan's Holy Order does allow them to fall back and shoot within the same turn, so once again putting that on the Dominus so that they can fall back and shoot because they're more likely to be locked up within combat due to being teleported next to an enemy is a very good choice in terms of how you distribute those different Holy Orders throughout your list. The troop choice for this list is concluded with 4 additional troop choices, each of those 4 troop choices being a unit of 5 Vanguard. The Vanguard are definitely the best choice within a veteran cohort for small mobility units due to their skirmish optimization ability, as it allows them to make much more successful advance rolls, and they can even benefit from the Holy Order of the Magi on the Techno-Archaeologist within the first couple of turns in order to position themselves very well in different locations within the table. All in all, these are pretty standard troop choices for an army build such as this. However, it's good to consider some of those small little decisions that did probably give this list a lot more mileage than it would have had in other circumstances. Now moving along with this list, we come to the elite choice for this battalion detachment. This list includes all of one elite choice, being a unit of 10 Sicarian Ruststalkers, and those Sicarian Ruststalkers are armed with transonic blades. This is a rather standard unit, though as you can see, there are no more Warlord or Relic slots available, so they can take some of their normal options, such as the Omniscient Mask or the Temporacopia. I definitely think the Temporacopia is a very good choice. However, considering what this list includes, I do understand why it wasn't included, as there just wasn't room. I will also say that a unit of only 10 Ruststalkers does seem a little bit light, but I can understand why there might be some points limitation or even model limitations that make it hard to include more of them, and one unit of Ruststalkers can definitely do enough work within a game by itself without you necessarily needing additional units. And as such, I think a single unit is a perfectly fine option, though maybe I would have wanted to play around with the points a little to include a second unit just for safe measures. Now moving on from the elite slot, we come to the fast attack choice of this battalion detachment. The first fast attack choice is a unit of 6 Iron Strider Ballistari armed with 6 las cannons. This is a very hefty unit, and it's very interesting what the implications of this unit is. Now I mentioned earlier that the Firepoint telemetry cache was a little bit strange on the Rangers. However, when you consider that the Iron Striders now have core again and have a data tethered keyword, it's very easy to see where the Firepoint telemetry cache might be allocated, as the Iron Striders can definitely benefit from the durability increase of the Firepoint telemetry cache, especially when you consider the large unit of them in this army list. Now add on top of that the ability to throw Luminescent Blessing and even the raiment of the Technomartyr on them, as well as even the Logai Holy Order, and you end up with a very durable unit of 6 Iron Striders that can put out quite a lot of damage. You will have to position the units a little bit carefully in order to be able to distribute all of the different buffs that you wish to distribute, as the Manipulus definitely wants to be buffing the weapons of one of the Ranger squads while also maybe giving some of the buffs to those Iron Striders in certain situations. Now the other reason that there is such a large unit of Iron Striders within this army list is because of the Eradication of Flesh secondary objective. With such a large unit that you can make incredibly durable, you are going to be able to take out most MSU targets and any vehicles that an enemy may have in their list, and if you throw enough of your buffs on that unit of Iron Striders, they're definitely going to be durable enough to survive most things that are going to be coming back at them, at least survive enough that a couple models remain. Now on top of that, I'll also spoil something about this list. The unit of Iron Striders is the only vehicle unit within this army list, and as such, for every turn that the unit of Iron Striders survives and takes out at least one unit, you're going to be scoring the points on that secondary objective. As such, this is a very interesting way of kind of gaining those secondary objective points. However, I will mention some army lists will be able to take out those Iron Striders, and in other cases, you're going to be against opponents who have too many large units for your Iron Striders to successfully take out a unit every single turn, considering that they're only going to be getting 12 shots. And even with all of the different rerolls and different abilities that you can stack, maybe you can get an additional 2 or so hits off of the second part of that Magi Holy Order. Though that being said, you do have to consider what kind of army list you're going up against, and you're going to have to consider if you can consistently take out a unit every single turn, and if your opponent can't take out your Iron Strider unit. This is definitely a very interesting tactic, and I think it's definitely something that can play very well into your favor, but I do think it does restrict your army list building in certain ways because you really don't want to include any additional vehicle units if you're including a unit such as this, so it does reduce your ability to include other vehicles if you're building out for this strategy. So do keep that in mind. If you build a list similar to this and you want to include a flyer, it's definitely going to reduce your ability to consistently score those secondary objective points, though in many cases the flyer might still be durable enough that you might still be able to get away with it, or if you can destroy a unit with the Iron Striders and the flyer and only lose the flyer within that turn, you're still doing okay and you're still scoring those points. Although I should also mention that the Iron Striders are going to be a massive target considering they're eating up over 500 points of your army list and are probably using a lot more points through the different buffs that you're going to be putting on them throughout the game. So do keep in mind, it is going to be a very resource intensive unit, although it is a very interesting inclusion and a very interesting style of play that really shows you can't really read Adeptus Mechanicus units at face value because there are so many different things that can be going on with an Adeptus Mechanicus list that it can be rather difficult to build and understand at certain times. Moving on to the second and third fast attack choices within this army list. The second fast attack choice is a unit of 10 sterilizers, which is a rather great unit, and I think most Adeptus Mechanicus lists could benefit from the inclusion of a unit of sterilizers. The sterilizers have a ton of mobility, can deep strike within the game, can even redeploy within the game, and put out enough damage to clean out most objective units that your opponent may have. Not only that, but they're great at cleaning out swarms and even screening in some situations. They're not terrible in melee either, so they're kind of a great unit overall, and I definitely think they're a unit that just does a ton of work and puts out enough firepower and has a great enough mobility that there really isn't much reason not to include them within lists, so this inclusion definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think you're going to be seeing them within many future games going forward. Finally, this list concludes with a single unit of 3 Cerberus Raiders. This is a fine enough unit, and it's definitely one that's benefited from a bit of a points reduction. Though do keep in mind that between the Cerberus Raiders and the Rust Stalkers, you've seen a reduction of 16 points, and 5 of those points ended up on a power sword that was just kind of a filler. Definitely it's nice to have those additional points available, but really it pretty much bought you an additional ranger and a power sword. So it's not something that's particularly exciting or particularly that impressive. All in all, that's never bad to have, but at the end of the day, it's definitely not something that really changes how you build your list. Though at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily sure how much of a points reduction the Adeptus Mechanicus needed when you consider that list building such as this is possible, now with all of the reversions to the data slate that was made. With that being said, I do think it's a very interesting list in some of the decisions that were made, and I think there were a lot of complicated decisions that were made going into building this list, so it definitely does have a lot of design that went into it and a lot of intelligence in terms of how it's built and played, and Rickard Nelson is definitely an amazing Adeptus Mechanicus player, so do keep in mind when I say a lot of the units that we see within this list are expected, that doesn't mean there aren't ways to optimize those units, and there are a lot of different ways of finding ways to play those units, even if you see a lot of lists include very similar units. I don't think this list is going to play necessarily the same as other lists that may include similar units but in different compositions and with different warlord traits and relics. And with that being said, I think it's very hard to look at Admech list at first glance and just understand everything going on with it without really dissecting it as we kind of did within this video, because a lot of things can seem kind of straightforward at first glance until you realize there's a unit of 6 Iron Striders that probably makes this list play in a certain way that's going to be different than a list that includes maybe 2 units of 3 Iron Striders or 3 units of 2 Iron Striders. In addition to that, I do think there are some variances that you can do with different builds in terms of the number of Rust Stalkers you include and the number of troops you include, as well as units like sterilizers and the potential of flyers being included within different Admech lists. So with that being said, I do think Admech are definitely within a healthier place in terms of competitive viability, and I do think there are going to be a lot of interesting builds, even though they're going to be including a lot of similar unit choices within those builds. And I do think those different builds are going to play differently enough in different situations that there's going to be a lot of fun you can have with an Adeptus Mechanicus army. That being said, I really like to see GW maybe push some different things to give you more incentive to play some of the different options within the codex that aren't seeing as much play. However, they'll have to wait until the next balance update. In any case, hopefully you found this video informative, and let me know what you think about this army list and the future of Adeptus Mechanicus in the comment section down below. Anyways, as always, thank you for watching, and as always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons. You guys are really awesome people and really do help support the channel. In addition to that, I would like to say, if you know anyone who may benefit from this content, please do share this video with them, as it not only helps the channel, but it also helps them out as well. And if you've enjoyed the content, do subscribe and like for future videos from this channel. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.